Good morning, members of the media. I returned to the country a few minutes ago and I've been in receipt of messages when I was overseas from several media, including NCN, on this question which is being tabled in Parliament this afternoon, the first reading. From what I've heard, there seems to be some misconception and lack of information, and I thought I should put it in its correct perspective. First of all, every civilized country that I know, there are provisions made for pension and special benefits for former presidents and prime minister, however styled. This is of universal application and there's nothing unique about it. Before the legislation of 2011, in any event, the Guyana government, since independence, had provided pension and benefits, sometimes informally, for its former president and prime ministers. For example, in the case of Mr. Chung, when he retired, he received pension and benefits, security, vehicles, a house, etc. In 1992, the new PP government accepted this principle, and both the past president and prime minister received benefits post-1992, security, drivers, and a vehicle. Those persons happen to be Messrs. Hoyt and Green. Therefore, it is mystifying that there is some contortion about this matter. In 2011, when the bill was promulgated and before, Sam Hines, speaking on behalf of the PPP and the government, made a very impassioned plea, and in the form of a letter published in the media, that it is the duty of every civilized society to ensure that the presidents and prime ministers, when they leave office, should be allowed to live at a certain level, consistent with the positions they held previously. A very strong letter he wrote. And this problem started because when the PP took the matter to Parliament in 2011, they only cater for pension and benefits for the former president. I don't want to speculate why they did not include the former prime minister. That's a matter for you to conclude, except to say the fact is that the People's Progressive Party did not have among its membership a former prime minister. Former Prime Minister Samuel Hines, even though he functioned substantially as Prime Minister from 1992, when Dr. Jagan died, he assumed the position of President and therefore is now enjoying the benefits and pension of a former President. I leave you to make a conclusion. Further, during the regime of the People's Progressive Party, bills were proposed. I'll ask my secretary to read the relevant portions of it. I've just come back from eye surgery. Read the relevant portion. Come, so they can see you. Read the relevant portions. Then I can field questions.
President and Prime Minister. Every person who, having held the office of President on or after the 16th of December 1966, or who, having held the office of Prime Minister on or after 22nd December 1965, ceases at any time after such date to be President or Prime Minister, shall be paid a pension under this Act with effect from the date on which he ceases to be President or Prime Minister, as the case may be, and subject to subsection 2, such pension shall continue to be paid during the lifetime of that person.
Read the other section.
The President's pension and the Prime Minister's pension shall be 7/8 of the highest annual rate of salary paid to such person at any time as President or Prime Minister, as the case may be, or $204,000 per annum.
I had that read because there are some soothsayers who are saying that this is a special provision for somebody named Hamilton Green. Why those provisions as published in the official gazette in 2012 by the then government was not assented by the president, of course, is another matter. I thought I'd make this clear because there's nothing strange about this, and it is my understanding that the bill as prepared by the Attorney General's office is intended to set the stage so that the principles established years ago and of global acceptance and universal application is put in place, and that the incumbent Prime Minister should also benefit when he ceases to be Prime Minister. Any questions?
Mr. Green, how would you respond to the statement, Gordon, mostly news source? How would you respond to the statement coming from the Guyana Human Rights Association that you served as Prime Minister in a period when Guyanese were faced by hardships, and they believe that many of the hardships would have come from the government at the time that you would have served in as Prime Minister, and so they're saying you're not entitled to a pension based on that alone. How would you respond to them?
Well, the response to that is that these gentlemen or ladies, whoever they are, obviously are versed in fomenting strife, distorting history, and not dealing with the relevant issues which I dealt with a moment ago. This kind of statement is mere propaganda being regurgitated by some set of persons. I don't know who they are. Completely irrelevant. Go to Europe. I've just come back from Europe, United Kingdom, anywhere, United States. The salaries attached to the head of state, the Prime Minister, the presidents, are always set aside for particular purposes. And in each of those countries, even African countries, there is poverty. And what we seek to do as politicians is to narrow that gap between the rich and the poor. It's not an easy thing. Every government has set out to do it. Some have failed, some have succeeded. It's a constant struggle. But I thought I should outline the principles involved and not deal with matters raised by the GHRA, completely irrelevant. And they have speculated on matters that they don't know about. And bring evidence. I don't know what, I thought about it, but these are what I call social mavericks. And those who seek to create bedlam, confusion, and mischief.
And the transparency group, sir, they have said that this matter reeks of cronyism, that you're being paid back for work you would have done for the government that's now in power.
That what?
That this may be also to ensure you're paid back for work that you would have done with the APNU. So they say it's cronyism. It's not really, you're not really entitled to it, and it should be thrown out.
Completely irrelevant. I repeat, in every civilized society, the President and the Prime Minister paid special pension and benefits. Those statements are easy to make, part of a circle of people who are out to create confusion and not dealing with the realities. I am not responsible for such statements. It's been happening all life. People are defied. Any other questions? This is a very placid media.
me, the evening news. Mr. Green, did you make any attempt during the reign of the PPC government to acquire your pension?
I have, on several occasions, brought to the attention of the previous government that there was some error in the legislation and it ought to be corrected. What we see happening today is an effort to correct that. It's not perfect, it's not complete, and I expect that the lawmakers will deal with whatever inadequacies remain. But this is something that has been a worry for a long time. And if you get hold of Sam Hines' letter, speak on behalf of the PP and the then government, it makes it very clear that every government has a responsibility to ensure that the presidents and prime minister live at a certain level when they demit office. He made a very, very strong plea. And if you get that letter, I think it ends the matter. I repeat myself, why in 2011 they did not complete the process is, of course, another matter. The size of the package for the former president is, of course, another issue, which the coalition government sought to deal with. I don't think that what is happening now can be considered either extravagant or lavish or out of kilter with the rest of the world.
Sir, the current Prime Minister, Mr. Nagamutu, has said that while he supports the motion that's going to Parliament, the bill that's going to Parliament, he would want to see it have your name. He prefers if your name is removed. So then
I share Mr. Nagamutu's view completely. I have not, as I said, I just returned a few minutes ago. I have not had a chance to talk with him and the other persons in the cabinet. But I share Mr. Nagamutu's view completely. I myself thought the wording should have been merely former Prime Minister. And there must be some reason why they've included my name and the dates that I was Prime Minister. But the fact is that it is what is before Parliament. And I agree with Mr. Nagamutu. That was my first reaction, which I gave when I was in Ireland. Somebody called me, and that was my first reaction. I thought, but the powers that be must know what they're doing, and I don't expect that there's any intention to exclude or keep anyone out or deny them benefits which they are entitled to under the law and based on tradition that is accepted all over the world. But Mr. Nagamutu is a member of the cabinet, and I'm sure he can sort it out. But I'm repeating, that's my first reaction before I heard what he had to say. I spoke with Dennis Chabral. I was in Ireland at the time, and I didn't know of the bill. And that was my first reaction when Chabral called me. My very first reaction when he called me. So there are no swords drawn with Mr. Nagamutu and myself. I agree with him. Anything else, ladies and gentlemen? I recommend all you young people take a visit to Ireland, see what's happening there in the health sector.
If we could afford it, we would. If we could afford it, we would.
Well, thank God I have a wife and children who still support me, and they ought not to be, but
Mr. Green,
if you get a wife who works and is faithful to you and caring for you, you'll be in my position. And if you've given service as long as several generations, you'll have my good fortune.
So, sir, do you still think you need the pension?
What?
Do you still think you need the pension, considering all these things?
If what?
Do you still think you need the pension?
Absolutely. I don't think I should be relying to maintain a certain level of life on my children and my wife, which I've been doing for the past umpteen years.
how would you assess your service as Prime Minister to Guyana, 1985 to 1992?
good, faced many challenges. I became Prime Minister just at a time when there was a breach, a break, a change in international relations. That was Gorbachev in his heyday. And a lot of people don't recognize the impact of Perestroika, the impact of the cooling of the Cold War on countries like Guyana. We suffered tremendously in the 70s because of the East-West conflict. There were times when sugar prices didn't mean anything. The spike in the oil prices in the 70s threw the economy upside down. And a lot of people who criticize that period are unaware that Guyana was not unique. In many countries, there were coups, starvation, when the oil prices shot up in the 60s and the 70s. We survived, introduced the concept by Mr. Bonham to feed, clothe, and house the nation in an effort to deal with that situation. We have not done enough, I think, in feeding and clothing. I'm hoping, expect under my leadership to bring housing back in line. It's going to be expensive. To give an ordinary man a house is a lot of money. The infrastructure, drainage, roads, infrastructure, lighting, facilities is not easy. But we are committed to housing the nation. It's a monumental task. We're going to do it. To answer your question, after 1985, we continued a program to do roads, build community centers, health centers, and to create conditions, most of all, to continue the work started in 1964 to bring our people together. We have not quite succeeded, but we have to continue that. Because unless there is unity among the people of all races, classes, this country is going to be stultified. We're going to be encouraging investment in a way that we benefit and to encourage our people to recognize that we have a patrimony to protect. Guyana is a small country. When you travel some other countries, 8, 9, 10 million people, we're less than a million people. And all we need to do is to continue work started back in the 60s and the 70s and to ensure that we bring some semblance of unity and progress to this country. I am confident we can do it. It's not going to be easy. There's still those who feel that their business is to oppose and to make it difficult. But we hope that in time those persons will recognize what is in the interest of the nation must be clear to their own selfish interests.
Mr. Green handled on to the HGP 19 News. Just a step away from what we're talking about. The parking meter project should come on board pretty soon. I'm not sure if you state your position on it already, but are you supportive of the parking meter at this time?
The what?
The parking meters. Are you supportive of the
You're not speaking to the mayor of Georgetown.
As a former mayor.
Well, the parking meter matter came up, almost 20 years ago. The council looked at it. We had discussions with the traffic department, the commercial community, and it was agreed it was something good for the central business district of Georgetown, which is a confusion at the moment. You have people parking, selling things on the street, not paying a cent to the council or anybody. So the parking meter was agreed to. In fact, the developer at the time had agreed to sign the memorandum of agreement and understanding on a Monday morning and received a letter from the then Minister Moore saying to us not to proceed because the central government was looking at this whole question of parking in the city. I suspect they continued looking for several years and nothing happened. I am not involved in the details at the moment, but the principle of parking meters is, again, of universal application. You bring some revenue to the municipal authority, and you bring some order to the city. And if you look around the city, it is chaotic. One trapeze, one said shouting. I've just passed through US, Europe, Trinidad. They all have parking meters and facilities everywhere. As I said, I'm not involved in the details, but the principle is not one that one should object to.
Mr. Greenwright and James, HGP 19. So the question of housing.
Housing?
Yeah. This Central Housing Authority last month, I think, met with the Islamic Development Bank concerning long-term housing program. Can you give us the details of that program or what it entails?
We have not yet concluded the details with the Islamic Development Bank, Ministry of Finance, and the General Government. But the impression I get from the conversation I had with the ISDB is that they're willing to come on board on this thing. We are committed to building thousands of homes next year for low-income, public service, and middle-income persons. We are now looking at the question of large swaths of land given to private developers who have not done what they were expected to do. They've not put in infrastructure. And right now at CHP, we're looking at means to establish that they're in violation of the terms of agreement and perhaps recover those lands to make them productive and for use. We don't believe it is right for people to have been given large tracts of land at moderate prices and just sit upon it for speculative purposes. So we're looking at that. We're also looking to correct the enormous mess we met in May of 2015, where millions were spent to build houses that were not properly constructed. We are now spending a few $100 million to correct the bad work done at Providence and Perseverance. Go and see for yourselves. Houses were built. First of all, they were all one size, one type, all red roofs. Front door moving away, roof leaking, septic tanks porous, bathroom water moving in the wrong direction. And it is unbelievable that those contractors were given their final payments and the house is not properly done. We've looked at some of those houses, we've talked to the people, we've had meetings with them, and the work started earlier, and we should complete that in another month or two to correct the bad work being done. We're now looking at the cost of infrastructure in housing, because housing is not just giving a man a house. For us, and that is why we've renamed the Ministry Communities, is to put a man to live in an attractive and a wholesome environment. We put people to live where there are no lights, no proper drainage, no proper sewage disposal system, no public open space for recreation, for schools, for educational purposes, for recreation. So we are now trying to put in place a system. It's going to take time and money, where people are putting homes that is in a healthy, happy environment. To deal with the tremendous cost involved, we are proposing some duplex types houses where you maximize the space you have, at the same time providing facilities for ordinary people to live in. We want to lift the level of people's standard of living. They have to change their habits, their ways of doing things. So it's a monumental task the President has given this ministry. And I said, I get the impression that ISDB is willing. I spoke to them, pointed out to them the importance of housing as part of the general thing, because a man who's ill-housed begins, first of all, his children don't have the environment in which to study, the environment in which to live a life, to be a real man. And so housing is an important aspect of our program, and it is a Big task. But I think we're up to it.
Just to follow up, last year too, police officers were promised turnkey homes. I know the remaining turnkey homes are expected to be completed in December. Will these promises be fulfilled to these?
Yes, we're going to complete by December. Once the weather holds, the work has started. We've made the funds available, examined some of the subcontracts, and to ensure that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past. And the contractors are held to the task they're supposed to be performing. We're also looking at employing, as consultants, experienced engineers and architects, so they would examine the work and tell us that this work has been properly done, and not just pay off people in a very capricious and casual manner.
Mr. Vladimir Patterson Sharp would have said that when these houses are complete, then police officers would benefit because they were among the
Who would benefit?
Police officers, as they were among the first persons.
But police officers are part of a group of persons who will benefit.
Right.
It's not a police officer scheme.
Right.
Policemen, soldiers, teachers, public servants, and the ordinary man or woman, once they qualify. The government has asked that we give preference to public servants. Policemen are public servants. There is also the thesis, I don't know how valid, that if you have a number of policemen in a particular community or geographic area, their presence will help to ensure proper security. Now that is, but a fairly safe assumption. And it is expected that when that is done, we put in place police stations. We talk with the Commissioner of Police and the ministry responsible. But everybody needs to get a decent home. Policemen, soldiers, nurses, teachers, everybody, public servants, reporters, members of the media. Particularly if you have spouses and families, and not wayward individuals. I'm not suggesting you are. Thank you very much. And excuse the conditions here, but I just came back, so I...